like animals, talking animals,
Yes.
morphic animals, yes.
So first she picked The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck, which I was telling Emma. Oh, hey.
Oh my god.
Oh, what are you doing here? Hi.
Reading the book, I was like, oh, Bradley.
What? Boo Radley. You think I'm weird? Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It is time for the most exciting video of the year, and that is the best books I read this year or in 2022, and I am so excited. This is my favorite video to film every year because I love reflecting and looking back on my reading year, especially the books that had the biggest impact on the previous year. And what I like doing as well is creating categories for these books to fit into, because if I tried to rank these books from 1 to 10, from maybe least favorite of the favorites to my favorite of the favorites, which I've done in the past, I just feel like they're all so different that they deserve their own category, and it's kind of hard to compare them to one another. So today I have some categories, and I'm very excited to go through them. I have some honorable mentions, I have noteworthy authors, a favorite reread, a bunch of favorite books in different genres, so I'm so excited to get through these, and without further rambling, let's just start talking about them. Alright, so I'm going to start with my 4 honorable mentions. I'm just going to go in no particular order with these. The first one I have is John Steinbeck's The Moon is Down. I read this book for a 24-hour readathon that I did with my best friend Emma, and it was such a wonderful, impactful story. It says, originally published at the zenith of the Nazi Germany's power, this masterful fable uncovers profound, often unsettling truths about war and about human nature. And it's just so fantastic, the perspective that he gives. I really love historical fiction, especially surrounding war. I've read a lot of historical fiction surrounding World War II in particular, and this was just a wonderful look into Steinbeck's perspective as well as his experience, and I thought it was amazing. I love John Steinbeck's writing, and I'm hoping to read more from him in 2023. If you guys saw, I just posted a video recently about my 2023 reading plans, and I have been saying that I want to read East of Eden or Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck for months now, so here's hoping that I read more Steinbeck in 2023, but this was a fantastic book. It didn't make the list because I didn't really have a category for it, but I definitely wanted to mention it as an honorable mention, so The Moon is Down. The next one is very different, and that is My Policeman by Bethan Roberts. So the story is inspired by E.M. Forster. E.M. Forster is one of my favorite novelists, and so knowing that, I was really interested in it. It is about a policeman and his sexuality, and exploring his sexuality in a traditional marriage as well as outside of his marriage, and it's a fantastically written book. The concept, the story, the plot itself, the characters, it's all so heartfelt and emotive. It almost felt like it was kind of an E.M. Forster novel. It had that mood to it where it was romantic but also quite sorrowful in some ways, and I feel like that's often the feeling that I get with E.M. Forster's writing, and I also wanted to read it because it was being adapted into the film with Harry Styles and Emma Corrin, and I thought that it was just a fantastic adaptation, as well as the book itself was wonderful. And I have been in and out of a really big reading slump this whole year, and this was one of the books that really helped me get out of my reading slump, at least for a short amount of time, so I really enjoyed reading this, and it reminds me of the summer, not only for the cover, but I read this a lot when I was going swimming, so I would go swimming for a little bit and then I would get out and I would read this book, which is also a perfect time to read this book is the summer, because two of the main characters, one of the main ways that they bond and grow their relationship is through swimming lessons, so this is really a perfect book for the summer, and it's just wonderful. The next book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I read this for the first time, which I have been wanting to read this book for so long, and this edition I actually just received from a subscriber, Kurt, for my birthday, if you guys saw that book haul. But I love this cover so much, it's so beautiful, and I really enjoyed the book. It takes place in New York City, and I went to university in New York City, so I always love hearing different perspectives of city life. This also has a lot to do with psychology and mental health, and I found that the way that those aspects were dealt, especially by a woman writer with a female main character, it was all handled in a really interesting way and gave you a really interesting perspective. It's not an absolute favorite. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't a complete standout, so that's why it's an honorable mention. I really enjoyed it. It's just not something that I want to completely scream about, so yes, definitely worth a read though. And then the last honorable mention is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I love Virginia Woolf's writing. I try to read a Virginia Woolf every year, and To the Lighthouse was fantastic. So this is again a very summery read, so I would recommend maybe reading it in the spring or summer if you care about seasonal reading, which I always like doing because I feel like the time that you read or the season that you read a certain book in really affects my reading experience. I always have a hard time kind of explaining Virginia Woolf's books, or at least doing them justice. I'll just read a little bit of the back. To the Lighthouse is made up of 3 powerfully charged visions into the life of the Ramsay family living in a summer house off the rocky coast of Scotland. There's the serene and maternal Mrs. Ramsay, the tragic yet absurd Mr. Ramsay, their 8 children, a lot of children, and assorted holiday guests. From the seemingly trivial postponement of a visit to a lighthouse, Virginia Woolf examines tension and allegiances and shows the small joys and quiet tragedies of everyday life that seemingly go on forever. It is just such a fantastic portrayal into this family and their relationships, and that is said perfectly, so I feel like that will give you a really good idea of what it's about, but it's also just handled so stunningly. Again, I don't really have a specific category to put it in, but I did want to mention it in this video, so it is an honorable mention. So the next 2 categories are for noteworthy authors. The first 2 authors are old to me, so authors that I have loved for a very long time that I rediscovered this year and read a lot of their work, and then the other author is a new to me author that I have never read from before, and I read their work this year and I really fell in love with their writing. So, the first 2 authors that are old to me that I rediscovered their books again and read more of their work is Kate DiCamillo, who I love so much. I read 7 of her books this year, and then the other author that I fell in love with from my childhood, like Kate DiCamillo, is E.B. White. I love E.B. White's writing. He wrote Charlotte's Web and The Trumpet of the Swan and Stuart Little. Kate DiCamillo wrote Because of Winn-Dixie and The Tale of Despereaux and so many other amazing books, and so I read a lot of their books this year. I read 2 of his novels, Charlotte's Web and The Trumpet of the Swan. I reread Stuart Little last year, I believe, and then I also read a short story by him, which I will tell you about in a little bit. But yes, Kate DiCamillo and E.B. White, I will talk a little bit more about them later. And then the new to me author is Meiko Kawakami, and she wrote Breasts and Eggs and Heaven. Those are the 2 books that I read from her this year. I don't have physical copies, unfortunately, but I am hoping to get physical copies soon. I really love the UK covers, so I've been kind of holding off, trying to decide whether I want the US or the UK covers. I'm leaning towards the UK covers. Anyway, I first read Breasts and Eggs this summer, and I loved it. It is such an intimate portrayal into a woman's experience, just in general, but also specifically Japanese women, modern Japanese women. I listened to the audiobooks. That's how I read both Breasts and Eggs and Heaven. The audiobooks were fantastic. I really liked the narration, and she just gave you a very honest portrayal, specifically for Breasts and Eggs, a glimpse into the everyday experiences that women face, and really shed light on a lot of, I guess, maybe taboo subjects that people don't often talk about or aren't very acceptable to talk about, whether that's body image or what women go through with their health and having children and creating relationships and all of those intricacies about a woman's experience, and I think they were handled beautifully. So I loved Breasts and Eggs, and then Heaven was a beautiful coming-of-age story about bullying and friendship, and I really saw a lot of myself, and I think just childhood in general, was captured very beautifully in Heaven, with how bullying can affect a young person and how that can also create a lot of bonds between two people that are bullied, can kind of come together and bond over the fact that they do feel kind of like outsiders and outcasts. And some of my favorite stories are about outcasts. I think that a lot of people feel that way because everyone deep down feels like an outcast. I don't know if that's true or not. I kind of feel like that's at least how I feel, that even the people that you see and you think, wow, they look like they have their lives together and they're so popular and everybody likes them, and you know, they get along with so many people and they're so charming and whatever, and they fit in so well. I feel like someone, even them, at some point had to feel kind of outcasted, and I don't know, I just feel like it's a rite of passage, it's a part of life. And anyway, Heaven kind of gave you that glimpse of showing you a specific experience, and being able to, I guess, relate to that really was such a wonderful reading experience for me. So Breasts and Eggs and Heaven, both by Meiko Kawakami, were fantastic, and I'm so glad that I discovered her this year, and I can't wait to read more of her books in the future. Okay, the next category is the book that made me laugh the most. I love doing categories kind of like the book that made me laugh, the book that made me cry, which I do have that one as well, but that's a little bit later, and kind of, I guess, telling you the books that made me feel a certain way. So the book that made me laugh the most is by my very favorite author, Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. Now this book, I feel like when I try to explain the synopsis, it's going to sound very strange and bizarre, and what this book is about isn't actually what this book is about. That doesn't make any sense, but I will try to explain. So this book, it takes place in the setting of a bank robbery that turns into a hostage situation at an open house for an apartment viewing. So that sounds ridiculous, because, well, it doesn't sound ridiculous, it's just a very unique setting. It's a very unique setup to a story, but what Fredrik Backman is a master at is humanity and emotion and humor. I love his writing more than I can say, more than I can express, and he makes me laugh like no other writer. Fredrik Backman is so great at creating tension, but then alleviating that tension with humor. And so I want to read you the opening of the book. Another thing that I love about books in general is dedications. I love the dedications in books, and this one has a fantastic dedication, and that is, this book is dedicated to the voices in my head, the most remarkable of my friends, and my wife, who lives with us. I love that so much. And so that gives you a little glimpse of Fredrik Backman's humor. It's quite dry, but also not at the same time. It's very emotive too. Okay, so this is the first paragraph of Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. A bank robbery, a hostage drama, a stairwell full of police officers on their way to storm an apartment. It was easy to get to this point, much easier than you might think. All it took was one single, really bad idea. And then this is the next paragraph. This story is about a lot of things, but mostly about idiots. So it needs saying from the outset that it's always very easy to declare that other people are idiots, but only if you forget how idiotically difficult being human is, especially if you have other people you're trying to be a reasonably good human being for. Now there's so much heart in his books, and there is just so much emotion in his stories, and I love everything about his writing. I talk about him quite a lot on my channel. He is sort of like a required read for me. Like, you have to read Fredrik Backman. I would recommend starting with A Man Called Uwe, which is one of my favorite books, or Anxious People might be a great place to start as well. I will be talking a little bit more about Fredrik Backman a little bit later, but this is the book that made me laugh the most, and I loved it. 5-star book. I've literally given all of his books 5 stars. He never disappoints, and he is just a must-read. The next category is my favorite short story that I read this year, and that is by E.B. White. So this is a collection of essays by E.B. White, and the short story that was my favorite of 2022 was titled Once More to the Lake. And it is such an incredible short story. I thought I would just read you a little bit of the opening just so you guys can get a taste of what it sounds like. One summer, along about 1904, my father rented a camp on a lake in Maine and took us all there for the month of August. We all got ringworm from some kittens and had to rub Pond's extract on our arms and legs night and morning, and my father rolled over in a canoe with all his clothes on. But outside of that, the vacation was a success, and from then on none of us ever thought there was any place in the world like that lake in Maine. We returned summer after summer, always on August 1st for 1 month. I have since become a saltwater man, but sometimes in summer there are days when the restlessness of the tides and the fearful cold of the sea water and the incessant wind that blows across the afternoon and into the evening make me wish for the placidity of the lake in the woods. A few weeks ago this feeling got so strong I brought myself a couple of bass hooks and a spinner and returned to the lake where we used to go for a week's fishing and to revisit old haunts. I took along my son, who had never had any fresh water up his nose and who had seen lily pads only from train windows. So it's basically this story about this main character bringing his son to his family summer home on this lake, and it's just a beautiful portrayal of, I guess, creating memories and also reliving the past, visiting old haunts. It's very emotive and heartfelt and just a beautiful short story. There's also a fantastic audio version available on YouTube so you can listen to it for free, so I highly recommend you give it a listen or a read. Now the next category is my favorite reread, and that goes to 3 Frederick Bachman books. I told you I was going to be talking about him again, and here we are. So the first one, I reread Beartown, and then I reread the sequel, Us Against You, in preparation for the 3rd book, which is The Winners. And I am planning on reading The Winners in 2023, which I am so excited about. This is one of my favorite book series, the Beartown series. This was my first time rereading them. I always get nervous with first rereads because I never know if my feelings are going to be the same or if I'm going to have a different view on the story. What I found most interesting was that I actually think my favorite out of these 2 is Us Against You. Beartown really sets the story and sets off the trajectory of where we're going and the plot itself, but when it really, I feel like, is at its best and comes together, and the tension and the emotion and the character developments, it's at its best when it's in Us Against You. I love Beartown, don't get me wrong. It is a fantastic, fantastic book, but I think it's very rare as well, and that kind of shows you the incredible talent that Frederick Bachman has. I think most times when you have a series, or you have a first book and a second book, you have a sequel, usually the sequel is a bit of a letdown. It has the second book syndrome, but this one I feel like is completely different because although Beartown is a phenomenal 5-star, incredible, amazing book, Us Against You is that, but maybe even a little bit better. So it's just fantastic when you have a writer that you can love their writing and you can even expect to be blown away even more with the next thing that they create or with the next book in the series. And that's exactly what happened with Beartown and Us Against You for me. So I have very high hopes for The Winners, and I'm very excited to read it in 2023. But yes, these were a fantastic, my absolute favorite reread of this year. Loved it so much. And then the other reread that I forget how many times I've reread this book now. It is a novella by Frederick Bachman called And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, and this is about a grandfather and his grandson. It really takes place in multiple places, but specifically in the grandfather's head. The grandfather is slowly losing his memory, and so we are very kind of thrown into different settings in a way where it really shows you and displays memory loss in a very unique way. If you want to cry, this is a great book that will make you cry. Anxious People will make you laugh. This book will make you cry. Beartown and Us Against You will make you cry and laugh and smile and get very angry. I was so angry when reading Beartown. But yes, anyway, so And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer is a really fantastic portrayal of memory loss and family and how you deal with a family member losing their memory. This is a subject that's incredibly close to my heart, and so every time I reread it, I just I just break down, because in the best way. It's so fantastic when you have a story that you can relate to so deeply and be so affected by in the most beautiful way. It just feels like, this book really feels like a hug for me. Like, I see what you went through, I see you, I see how you feel, and this book is partially for you, and this book is a hug, this book is a comfort, and that's exactly what this book is. And I think that that's why I love Fredrik Backman so much, because he really doesn't feel like an author, he feels more like a friend, because his narrative voice is so particular that when you read a Fredrik Backman book, you know you're reading a Fredrik Backman book, and it just feels like returning to an old friend. Even if the narrators change, you always can tell that his writing style is him. And this is also, all of his books are translated from Swedish into English, so props to his translators. This one in particular is translated by Alice Menzies, and I just want to read you the introduction, which is written by Fredrik Backman. This isn't the story itself, it's just the introduction. Dear reader, one of my idols once said, "The worst part about growing old is that I don't get any ideas anymore." Those words have never quite left me since I first heard them, because this would be my greatest fear, imagination giving up before the body does. I guess I'm not alone in this. Humans are a strange breed in the way our fear of getting old seems to be even greater than our fear of dying. This is a story about memories and about letting go. It's a love letter and a slow farewell between a man and his grandson, and between a dad and his boy. I never meant for you to read it, to be quite honest. I wrote it just because I was trying to sort out my own thoughts, and I'm the kind of person who needs to see what I'm thinking on paper to make sense of it. But it turned into a small tale of how I'm dealing with slowly losing the greatest minds I know, about missing someone who is still here, and how I wanted to explain it to all of my children. I'm letting it go now, for what it's worth. It's about fear and love, and how they seem to go hand in hand most of the time. Most of all, it's about time, while we still have it. Thank you for giving this story yours, Fredrik Backman. I could just cry reading that. The part where he says, it's about missing someone who is still here. Oh God, just right in the soul, right in the soul. This is one of the most incredible books I've ever read, and you need to read it. It also has a fantastic audiobook version. The narrator is great. It's told by a grown man in the perspective of the grandfather, so it does again have that feeling of like a grandfather is telling you a story, and that is just one of the greatest comforts ever. Please read this story. It's a novella. It will take you literally no time to read. It'll take you maybe a half an hour, if that. So Fredrik Backman deserves all the love in my book, and in my eyes, pun intended, my favorite reread of the year. The next category is the best non-fiction book that I read this year. I unfortunately don't have a physical copy of this book, but I desperately want to get one, and that is Homo Irrealis by Andre Aciman. He is the writer of one of my favorite books, Call Me By Your Name, and its sequel, Find Me. Homo Irrealis is an essay collection about a lot of different things. It's about travel, it's about movies, it's about art, it's about writing, it's about stories, it's about so many things. It feels very intimate, as in it feels like you're just speaking to him, like you're sitting down to have a coffee or a tea or a drink with him, and he's just talking to you. And I love when books feel like a conversation, especially if they're nonfiction. I'm not a really big nonfiction reader, but that one I really loved. He also, through Homo Irrealis, he introduced me to the French director and writer Eric Rohmer, and I started watching a lot of Eric Rohmer's films. It's his 6 Moral Tales, I believe they're called. I have it in the other room, I should have grabbed it. What I loved is discovering Eric Rohmer through Andre Aciman, discovering films and other stories through this one nonfiction book. His writing is very poetic and lyrical, I should also say. Even in his nonfiction, he just has such a great way of making his words very lyrical and kind of sound like music, even though they don't rhyme, there's no meter, there's no rhythm. Just the way that he constructs a sentence is beautiful. So that is Homo Irrealis, a fantastic book. I would highly recommend giving it a read if the topics that he discusses in it are of interest to you. The next category is the best book for children that I read this year, and I actually just read it. So this book is for children. I forgot the age range. I think it was between 3 and 7, but I could be wrong. Something that if you're new to my channel, you don't know about me, I am a writer and an illustrator. Right now I'm working on stories for children and illustrations for children. What I love about children's literature is that anyone of any age can read these stories and get so much out of them. And I have a whole video on children's literature and why it is so important for adults to read children's literature. So I do love children's literature. It's like one of my greatest passions. And anyway, so that's why I have a few categories talking about children's literature, because I love reading children's books. So the first one that I have is The Truth Pixie by Matt Haig. This is in his Christmas series. We have The Boy Called Christmas, The Girl Who Saved Christmas, Father Christmas and Me, and then I have The Truth Pixie, which is about a character in his Christmas series. So The Truth Pixie is following this pixie who can only tell the truth, and how she has a hard time making friends because all she does is tell the truth, and the truth can sometimes be insulting. Now, what I love about this book is that it's for a younger audience than his other series, but what I love about this one is that it rhymes. So I thought that I would read you a little bit of The Truth Pixie. Okay, so many things that I love about this book. One of them is that it's illustrated by Chris Mould, and Chris Mould is one of my favorite illustrators, and he also illustrates all of Matt Haig's Christmas books. So they do feel very consistent. The series is so wonderful, and it really adds so much to the story, and the pictures do tell you things that the words don't. So what the pictures tell you is that this story is being told to a young boy going to sleep in his bed, and then the way the composition and the panels flow is that we slowly go into this snow globe, and what is taking place in the story that the father is reading, or the parent is reading, takes place in the snow globe, if that makes sense. Okay, here we go. In a land 2,000 miles from here is a place where snow falls all the year. There you find trolls and goblins and elves, and talking rabbits, rather pleased with themselves. Other creatures live there as well, like this truth pixie, whose tale I shall tell. So it's just a fantastic rhythm, and I don't know, I love it so much. Okay, I'm just gonna read 2 more pages. Also, it's super short. The other books in the Christmas series are a bit more like middle grade novels. This one is for a younger audience, so there's a lot less writing and a lot more illustrations, but I loved it. I thought it was just as fantastic as the other books in the series that are for an older audience. Okay. Truth Pixie's sad, as she's not like the others. She's not like her 19 sisters or 38 brothers. She's not like her brother Brian, who dances and sings. She's not like her sister Silva, with bright shiny wings. She can't tell stories, she can't sing songs, she can't do magic, she can't right wrongs. In fact, for a pixie, she is quite peculiar, and the reason for that is her great Aunt Julia. When she was young, Aunt Jay cast a spell. She said, "From this day on, the truth you shall tell. To be the truth pixie, that is your curse. She must tell the truth, for better or worse." Imagine. So that is The Truth Pixie. It is just such a fantastic story, and when I was reading this, I just really wanted to like read it to a young child. It's one of those stories that I feel like it's fun for the adult to read the story. Like I just wanted to read this book to someone because I loved the rhyme. These are stories that I think are perfect for reading aloud. This book I think is meant to be read aloud. Because it just has the cadence and the rhyme and the lyricism, and it's just such a fun experience. I had a blast reading this, and I read it maybe last week. So yes, The Truth Pixie, love it so much. I cannot recommend Matt Haig's Christmas series enough. Now the next book is for a slightly older audience, and that is for middle grade readers around 8 to 12, 13. Again, middle grade and children's books really can be read by all ages. I am 24 and I'm reading these books. If you are at any age, you can read these books because they really are so wonderful, and the messages behind them, just that's what I love about children's literature. It's perfect for everyone. And you're never too old to read a children's book in my eyes. Okay. The next book is by Katie Camillo, and that is The Beatrice Prophecy. This is her most recent book, and it came out in 2021. This is also illustrated by another one of my favorite illustrators, Sophie Blackell, and it's a stunning, stunning, stunning book. It's kind of a medieval story. It's kind of best to go in not knowing too much, but I will read a little bit of the inside flap just so you can get somewhat of an idea of what it's about. There is one creature that the monks of the Chronicles of Sorrowing fear above all others, and Suelica the goat. The monks fear her sharp teeth and her hard head and her wily ways. And so imagine Brother Edic's terror when he goes to feed Ansuelica one morning and finds a child in the pen with the demon goat. The child does not know where she came from. She does not know who her people are. She remembers only one thing, her name, Beatrice. The king's men, however, know who the child is, and they are searching for her. And one of my very favorite parts about this book is how one of the main themes is how important reading is and the power of being able to read. And it is also just beautifully illustrated by Sophie Blackl. I have researched so much about Sophie Blackwell's process as well as Katie Camillo's writing and their teamwork together. I feel like they are just such a perfect pairing as author and illustrator. It's just so beautiful. And it's a gorgeous story. Perfect for any age, and I highly recommend you give it a read. It's so good. The next category is dedicated to young adult literature. Now, I don't read a lot of young adult fiction. I mainly stick to classics, literary fiction, and children's literature. But I do love one particular author, and that is Alice Oseman. And I read 3 of their books this year and loved all 3 of them very, 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 very much. So the first one is Radio Silence, which is Alice's second novel after Solitaire, and it's about creativity and the pressures of academia. So the back says, "What if everything you set yourself up to be was wrong? Frances is a study machine with one goal. Nothing will stand in her way, not friends, not a guilty secret, not even the person she is on the inside. Then she meets Aled, and for the first time, she's unafraid to be herself. So when the fragile trust between them is broken, Frances is caught between who she was and who she longs to be. Engaging with themes of identity, diversity, and the freedom to choose, Radio Silence is a tour de force by the most exciting writer of her generation." So I completely agree. And it's really about being creative in a world where it almost feels like, okay, well, I need a normal job, I need a real job, I need to work a 9 to 5 and kind of get away from my creativity because there's more security in a normal job outside of a creative field. And if you guys know me at all, you know I feel very strongly about that because I am in a creative field as a freelance illustrator and writer and creator, and I always battle with the thought that the security of a 9 to 5 is there, and should I be aiming for that, or should I be sticking to the dream of being a freelance illustrator? And so I love being a freelance illustrator, but it does come with not all the securities that a 9 to 5 job comes with. So anyway, this is a theme, one of the biggest themes, the big theme in this book, and I really love how Alice handled it and the way that our main character Frances really deals with that. It's about internet fame as well as being a creative, academia. It's really about a lot of themes that I can relate to very much, and so reading this was really interesting because it gave me a different perspective. I'm hoping to read I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman next year in 2023, so I'm very excited about that. And then the next Alice Oseman book that I read and loved was Heartstopper Volume 4. I love Heartstopper with my whole heart. These are just my comfort characters. Nick and Charlie are just the greatest. I love them with every fiber of my being, and Volume 4 was amazing. I love following their story. I also watched the TV show this year. The TV show came out. It was more than I could have imagined. The way that they adapted the graphic novel to screen with live action, the actors were amazing, and just the way that they animated parts of it to make it feel more like the comic, it was just perfect. This book is perfect. Alice Oseman's writing and illustrations, she's one of my favorite illustrators as well, just amazing. Just absolutely, absolutely amazing. Love Heartstopper so much. And then I did also read the Heartstopper yearbook this month. So I just wanted to put it in here to tell you guys that I loved it. It's just like added bonuses to the Heartstopper series where it feels very much like a yearbook. We have character profiles and new comics, the art of Heartstopper, insights into Alice's creative process, some mini comics, some trivia, and how to draw the characters. So really just fun things if you are a Heartstopper fan that I just love that we get little insights into different aspects of the world and Alice's process. The next category is my favorite fantasy book of the year. It's also the only fantasy book that I read this year, but we're just gonna pretend. It is really the best fantasy book, one of the best fantasy books that I've ever read. I have read some fantasy. A few years ago, I read more fantasy earlier in my reading journey. I don't read too much fantasy anymore, but I did read Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, and I loved it. I loved it so much. If you guys have been watching my videos, you know the journey that I went on with this book. Emma and I started reading it when I was visiting her in Canada, and so what I love so much too, and another category on this list is my favorite bookish memory of 2022, and that is going to Canada to visit Emma. And so that's kind of tied in with reading Game of Thrones because she and I read this together. You can watch us read it in our 24-hour readathon where we started this book, and it's just such a great memory now that I have like all these little jokes and things, and I just look at this book and I think of Emma because I started reading her copy in Canada. I bought myself this edition in Canada at Indigo, Chapters Indigo. It was my first time going to Chapters Indigo, and it was such a fun day to get this book. So this book physically, like the book itself, holds such a special place in my heart, as well as the story. I love Game of Thrones. I watched the whole series this year and I loved it, and it's just amazing. It's so popular for a reason. It's just such an incredible world to be in, and I was really so upset to leave it. I did finish watching the series, but I am going to keep reading the books because I don't want to ever leave this world. So yes, Game of Thrones, love it so much. Okay, the second to last category is my favorite classic of the year, and then the last category is my favorite contemporary book of the year and my favorite book of the year. Also, my favorite contemporary book and my favorite book are the same thing. Okay, but my favorite classic of the year is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Now, I read a lot of fantastic classic fiction books, so I do have a runner-up that is fiction, but this was really one of the first philosophy books, if not the first philosophy book that I read. This is just one of those books that I think is kind of like a required read for existence. It's his journal. This was never meant to be published, and so it's this really great insight into a person that lived so long ago, and to show you how much humanity at its core really hasn't changed, and how the emotional aspects of life and the things that we are dealing with today inside ourselves and our souls is really no different to what people have been dealing with forever. When he talks about just being present, being in the present moment, and that is, I think, the thing that I really took away from this book, and something that I always try to implement, is just being happy in the present, because I'm always the person that's like looking forward to something to happen, or excited about the future, planning for the future, creating goals and wanting to achieve certain things in the future, and I think I always have to remind myself to focus on where you are now and to really appreciate what you're doing in the present moment and just be there and be whole and appreciate everything that you have right now. It's so exciting to look forward to things and to set goals and to be excited to achieve things in the future. I guess there just needs to be balance. My mom always says, and she watches my videos, so she's gonna smile while watching this, everything in moderation. Her favorite word is moderation, and so that's what I feel like is the perfect thing of being in the present, but also looking forward to the future, and I guess reflecting on the past. It's all very important aspects of life, and I guess what Marcus Aurelius is saying is to just remind you to live in the present and appreciate the present, but also I think that it's all in moderation. So, to quote my mom, this is one of those books that I feel like if you're having an off day, this might be a really good book to read for that feeling. So this is my favorite, I guess, philosophy classic, and then my favorite fictional classic was The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This is the beautiful Penguin Deluxe Edition, which is the Penguin Threads. I love this edition so much, and I know a lot of people ask me about these, so it is from the Penguin Deluxe Editions. I read this for a 24-hour readathon with Emma, where she picked the books that I would read, and she picked The Wind in the Willows for me because I love anthropomorphic animal characters, and I loved this story so much. The writing was amazing, the characters were hilarious, Toad is unhinged, and in the best way possible. I loved Toad, he was probably my favorite. Emma also gifted me a Wind in the Willows shirt.
I mean, on your shirt, Ratty.
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a rat. This is the shirt that Emma got me. It's the Wind in the Willows shirt. That's us. I'm the rat. You're the... Is that a mole? Is that the mole? You're a mole. I'm rat. And then she also gifted me for Christmas an ornament of Toad. So it's just... The Wind in the Willows really is so special because, again, like Game of Thrones, we could just bond over The Wind in the Willows. She loves The Wind in the Willows so much. She also got me a beautiful edition of it when I was in Canada. So that copy is also really special to me. So I just love The Wind in the Willows. Not only for the story, but for the sentimental background. And again, it has such beautiful, beautiful writing in it. There are so many quotes that I tabbed because I loved them so much. This is one of my favorites on page 48. People come. They stay for a while, they flourish, they build, and they go. It is their way. But we remain. There were badgers here, I've been told, long before that same city ever came to be, and now there are badgers here again. We are an enduring lot, and we may move out for a time, but we wait and are patient, and back we come, and so it will ever be. It's saying that nature was here first, and humanity comes and goes, but the badgers have always been there. The way that the settings are described in this book as well, just everything about this, it's so imaginative and whimsical and beautiful and lovely, and I loved it very much, so that is The Wind in the Willows. My favorite book of this year, the book that has made me cry more than any book in my entire life. I finished this book and was disheveled. I was in tears. I was just in a river of my own sorrow, and that book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. A moment for this book. Can we all get a round of applause for Never Let Me Go? Thank you so much, thank you. Why am I thanking you? Thank you, Kazuo Ishiguro, for writing this book. I want to tell you, I am telling you nothing, absolutely nothing about the plot. You are going to know nothing about this book. What you are going to know is that you need to read it. You need to go into it knowing nothing, you need to read it, you need to experience it, and then you need to come back to me and tell me your thoughts. That's what needs to happen. All you need to know is that this is the most everything book. I don't even know what to say, how to talk about this book. People have asked me if I would do a whole video just talking about Never Let Me Go. I would love to, and to get into spoilers and everything, I would love to, but I feel like that would be so hard because I feel like I just would not know what to talk about because there's so much to talk about. There were so many emotions felt while reading this, not only sorrow. It's bittersweet, I guess. I'm trying to pick the right word, but I don't know. It's one of those books that is so hard to describe because it is so many things. Can we also take a moment for this edition, this cover, because it is stunning. Anyway, so many things that I could say about this book. The title is one of my favorite things, the way that the title finds its way into this story, why there's a cassette tape on the cover, maybe it has something to do with the title, the characters, Tommy is one of the characters that holds such a dear place in my heart. We are following Kathy H. I don't want to say too much, I really don't. Just know that this is one of my favorite books of all time. This is the book that made me cry the most ever, and I love it very dearly. There are so many aspects of this story that I could talk about that I love. The setting, the scenery, and the movie adaptation I watched this year as well. the color palette of that film, the cinematography, the locations, the acting, everything, the writing, the screenplay, just, oh, I feel like all I can do is just hold it up and just sit here and just tell you to read it. And that's all that I'm really doing. So here I am, sitting here, holding it up, telling you to please read it. So that's my favorite book of 2022, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. You can see I have all of his other books right here because I plan to read all of his books, everything that he writes. I would read his grocery list. I would read literally anything that this man wrote or will write. And yes, I also read Clara and the Sun this year by Kazuo Ishiguro, but I didn't love it as much as Never Let Me Go. I did really enjoy it, but compared to like my feelings and my reaction to this book, they're just very different. Anyway, I think that's it. Thank you, Kazuo Ishiguro, for writing my favorite book of 2022. Thank you so much. So those are all of the books that I have to talk to you about today. I will put a little template in the description box of all of the categories that I included in this video so that you guys can fill it out yourselves and leave that in a comment. I would absolutely love to read what books fit into the categories that I have made for this video. I would love to read your lists. Or if you don't want to fill out every section of the categories, let me know what your favorite book of 2022 was, which is always the most exciting thing about the end of the reading year, is to pick that one book that has had the effect on you that no other book has had. For me, it's this one. I will truly never let go of this book. That is the truth of it. So have no fear, I will never let you go. Oh, I'm getting goofy now because it's so funny, at the ends of my videos, I always feel like I'm at my silliest because I've just spent this whole time like rambling and I'm now just, I don't know, I always get a little silly at the ends of my videos. Anyway, thank you so much for, I can't speak. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you had a fantastic reading year in 2022. I hope you have an even better reading year in 2023. And I will see you very soon in another video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. You are also, oh my gosh, another category that I forgot. You are also one of my favorites of 2022. All of you people watching, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your continued support. You mean the entire world to me. You are one of my favorites of 2022 and of all the years. Past, future, present, what am I now? Ebenezer Scrooge. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching this video. I'm sending you all of my love and my best wishes and happy holidays, happy new year. I will see you before then. So what do we say at the ends of my videos? Happy reading.